Light wallets, hot wallets, cold wallets, oh my. So a lot of people have been asking me where they should store their Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, or whatever coin. And that's kind of a question with many different answers based on the level of convenience you want versus the level of security you're trying to get. So I want to preface that this is in no way legal, financial, or even technological advice. You're responsible for where you store your own cryptocurrency, and because of the decentralized nature of it, your responsibility to keep those secure is completely on you. So what I wanted to provide today was kind of just like a sliding scale for you from 1, which is the easiest to use but also the least secure, all the way through to 6, which is the kind of more difficult to use but the most secure. And I've come up with this scale as a way for you to kind of measure how much risk you're willing to take and just give you an idea of where you might want to store your cryptocurrency. Now before we get started, just a simple definition of a wallet. A wallet is simply a collection of public and private keys. Just like you store your credit cards in your regular wallet, each combination of a public and private key should be thought of just like a credit card. And if you get access to that, you get full access to everything that's in that particular wallet address. And the ramifications of who owns access to those keys, mainly the private key, is really important as we go through this scale. So number 1 on the easiest to use but the least secure is exchanges or hot wallets. And those kind of things kind of go in tandem. Services that started out as exchanges, things like Coinbase, Bitstamp, that kind of thing for Bitcoin, and now they've expanded into Ethereum. They had a wallet functionality at a very basic level, but over the years, because they've gotten the most mainstream attention, a lot of people use something like Coinbase as the place they store all of their currency. Now the problem with using one of these types of hosted web services as a place to store all your money is if they get hacked or somebody gets access to your account, you can lose everything. And some of them are more reputable than others. Some like Coinbase, Gemini, some other US-based exchanges have insurance backing them up, and they're fairly well regulated at this point. But at the end of the day, these services don't give you access to your own private keys. Your funds are just numbers in a centralized database somewhere that get moved around in their own system. And all the cryptocurrency, the Bitcoin, the Litecoin, the Ethereum, which is currently the 3 that, say, Coinbase holds, are really just all accessed through their hot wallet, which Coinbase own. And they have a series of things called hot wallets, which have smaller amounts for a security purpose, and cold wallets where they store all their amounts. But the gist of it is that all of these exchanges own all of your keys. So even if the service didn't get hacked but just went offline due to server issues, you're unable to access your money then and there. Now the reason people use these a lot is A, because it's the easiest way to transfer your money between cryptocurrencies and also US dollars, but also because it's just instant and it's there very accessible all the time. Now I personally store some money on Coinbase because I know the company and I trust them and they have that insurance I mentioned. But do I think it's a great idea to store, thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars there? No. And the biggest thing to worry about with these centralized exchanges and wallets is your account actually getting hacked. And this has happened a lot with some of these services, with people getting access to people's phone numbers or emails, impersonating somebody, and then getting access to their account. So my only advice is if you're going to use one of these centralized services is that you set up 2-factor authentication and try to get that account as secure and locked down as possible, just to the best of your ability. So that's the most centralized and least secure way in my opinion. Next up is something called light wallets, and I break this into 2 and 3 actually, because number 2 is what I call dependent light wallets. Some examples of dependent light wallets include Electrum and Mycelium for Bitcoin, or something like MyEtherWallet for Ethereum, or Jaxx Wallet for just kind of a range of cryptocurrencies. And these wallets are a lot more secure because they do give you access to your private keys, and they also do all the cryptographic work on the client side, so nothing really sensitive is being done on a server somewhere. The reason I call category number 2 dependent light wallets is because after all that cryptographic work is done with the private keys and signing transactions on the client side, this category of wallets still use a centralized server or series of servers somewhere that they own to broadcast those transactions and basically interact with the cryptocurrency network. So something like MyEtherWallet, for example, all the cryptographic work and the private keys and all of that stuff is happening in your browser. But when you actually go to send a transaction and connect with the network, that gets processed through one of their nodes that is connecting and doing that on behalf of you. And there's not a huge security risk here really, but the problem with dependent light wallets is if that node gets overflowed with requests and goes down, then just like on category number 1, you're not able to send any transactions or interact with the network in any way because you're dependent on that centralized node. And this has been the case with things like MyEtherWallet in the past. When the network gets really congested, it can be a challenge to try and get a transaction sent through there to the Ethereum network because it's all going through this one node. Category number 3 is just like category number 2, but I call those independent light wallets. And the reason I call them independent is because in addition to doing everything client-side with the private keys and the cryptography, the connection to the actual network is also taken care of by the client itself. There's no server that it's using as an intermediary. Now, some examples of these for Bitcoin, which there are more light wallets for, Multibit, Armory, something called Bread Wallet on iOS. These use a technology called SPV, or Simple Payment Verification, which in a nutshell makes them more lightweight by only downloading the headers of the blockchain. And I'll talk about the blockchain download in a second. But it only downloads the headers, which is obviously a lot less than the full transactions in all of history. And it makes the network traffic that wallet has to deal with a lot less than it would if you ran a full Bitcoin install. Bitcoin is far further ahead in terms of SPV and the full light client arena, but Ethereum has some stuff in the works. And if you know of any functioning Ethereum light wallets which interact directly with the network and not through a third-party node, definitely paste it in the comments below because I'd love to check them out. And being number 3, kind of in the middle of the scale, I really think these independent light wallets that do all the cryptography, give you your private keys, and then interact in a kind of headers only way with the network are probably the best kind of bang for buck in terms of ease of use versus security. Now, number 4 is an interesting one, and there aren't a huge amount of options, but it's hardware wallets. And you've probably heard about these and said, what on earth is a hardware wallet? It's really just a USB dongle that stores all of your private and public keys and everything related to your wallet on that USB stick. The 2 most popular examples here being Trezor, which has been around for quite a while now, but there's also something called the Ledger, which is very popular. And these USB stick hardware wallets typically have an accompanying app or Chrome extension that you can use when you plug the USB stick into your computer. The benefit of these is that your private keys aren't being stored on your computer. You can take them around with you or store them wherever you want because they're just on that USB key. And the other thing that USB key does is when plugged into the computer, all the cryptographic work, the signing of the transactions, is all happening on that stick rather than the computer itself. So the only thing that the computer is being used for is to broadcast or transmit and interact with the network. Now, most implementations I've seen of the Chrome extensions or apps are similar to those dependent light wallets I mentioned at number 2, but hardware wallets can interact with other independent light clients if you go and find them. So things like Electrum. Some of these wallets can piggyback off the hardware wallet technology to do all the cryptography offsite on the USB key and then just send the transaction through via the computer. And the real advantage here over just using an independent light wallet is that the private keys are disconnected from the computer. So say somebody steals your computer or say somebody steals your phone where you were using one of these wallets before, they don't get access to all of your coins. That being said, if somebody steals your little USB stick, well then there are ways that they could potentially break the encryption in the future and get access. Hardware wallets also come in at number 4 because they can be a little finicky to use. They're not simple, they're simpler now and they've evolved over the years, but it's still not something that a regular person off the street would want to do. It's really kind of an enthusiast community that are using these things. Now, coming in at number 5 is kind of the OG client. It is the full or thick client, which most of you are probably familiar with because you've tried to install one of them before. And what I mean by that is I'm talking about Bitcoin Core or the Ethereum Mist client, the things that you'll download if you go to bitcoin.org or the Ethereum website. Now, the reason these things are called thick clients these days is because the blockchain has to be downloaded in its entirety. And back in the day, this wasn't really an issue because the blockchains were a lot smaller. But if you've tried to sync Bitcoin Core lately and download its nearly 150 gigabyte blockchain, you've probably found that it's taking a few hours or even days to get down the pipe to your computer. And Ethereum isn't that far behind given how young it is. It's already around 70 or 80 gigabytes compressed. So these things are getting super heavy. And when you're syncing these blockchains, you're not just downloading them, your computer is actually verifying every transaction in the chain to make sure the thing is secure. And people will often ask me, why is my CPU at 100% and my fans are spinning like crazy? It's because your CPU is being used to verify that history of transactions across 150 gigabytes of data. So these sound like good reasons not to run one of these clients, but there is a whole bunch of added security in doing so. Because you're downloading and verifying the whole blockchain, you're obviously getting a lot more security and confirming all these transactions. The other benefit is that there is no intermediary between you and the network. Your computer is connecting directly to the network and participating with other peer-to-peer nodes. And running one of these thick clients is something called a full node, actually does contribute back to the ecosystem because you're providing your computer as one of the sources of truth in this kind of peer-to-peer network of people that say, hey, I have a copy of the blockchain. This is what happened. Now, a few years ago, I would have honestly recommended to everybody that they run a full client on their desktop, but these days it's just kind of not feasible, especially on devices that don't have that much storage or don't have a CPU that can kind of handle the load of verifying these transactions. But say you're thinking of hacking around on the blockchain and doing some development work where you want to interact with the data that exists on it, then definitely go ahead and download the full blockchain. Just do it on a server or something that has the technical resources to do that. So that's number 5, and you're probably thinking, wait, if the full client is number 5, what's number 6? And coming in at number 6 is the paper wallet. And you might have heard of these before. It's kind of going old school with the way you store your cryptocurrency. A paper wallet involves using some sort of tool on a computer, preferably air-gapped, and all that air-gap means is not connected to the internet so that nobody can be snooping on you. And using that tool, you simply generate a public and private key pair like you would with any wallet, but instead of storing them in a database somewhere so that you can use them at a future date, you print them. So you simply print the public key on one side of a piece of paper and the private key on the other side. And usually you put some sort of cover, like some foil or something, over the top of the private key so people can't just take a picture of it if you ever flash the paper wallet to somebody. But this is often the way that people do something called cold wallets. Instead of storing all the letters and numbers that make up a private key, they'll actually store a QR code representation of that, and they'll go and they'll put it in a safety deposit box, bury it somewhere, who knows. But in the future, you can take that out, scan it on a phone or a computer, and recover that paper wallet. And paper wallets actually kind of show one of the benefits of a network like Bitcoin in that you can fire up a public address and send money to it without that thing having to be online. So that address just happens to exist, and that private key is the key to open that public address. But that doesn't mean that that wallet has to be connected to the internet at all times. People can easily send cryptocurrency to a paper wallet that's sitting in a safety deposit box on the other side of the world, without that wallet ever being online. And you'll often hear this type of storage referred to as cold storage. And it's really the I'm burying my gold in my backyard kind of approach to securing your cryptocurrency and making sure that absolutely no one can ever steal it or hack it or do anything with it. So just to recap, that's 1 through 6. 1 being the easiest but least secure, through to 6, which is the kind of more difficult to use but most secure. 1 was those centralized exchanges and hot wallets you can access with just a username and password. 2 was the dependent light wallets, which are secure but rely on a third-party node to connect to the network. 3 was the independent light wallet, which does all of the cryptography on your computer and also communicates in a lightweight fashion with the network. 4 was hardware wallets, which can piggyback on all of these types of technology and provide you a way of keeping your keys secure on a USB stick. 5 was the full or thick client, where you download and verify the whole blockchain. Number 6 was the paper wallet, where you print the private key on a piece of paper and lock it away somewhere safe. My recommended approach is to use a combination of those methods to reduce your risk, while also making sure that if you need some cryptocurrency in a bind and quickly, you can get access to it. So I recommend you keep the bulk of your cryptocurrency savings in either a 3 through 6. I personally choose the independent light wallet to store probably around 80 to 90% of holdings. And for that remaining money, you want to be able to access quickly or trade between different currencies. As long as you choose a trustworthy provider, lock down your account with things like two-factor authentication to the best of your ability, you can keep that money on a hot wallet or an exchange where it's easily accessible, usually via a mobile device or the web. And by spreading out the risk like that, that, there's less a chance of you getting hacked or something happening and you losing a large quantity of money. So I mentioned a bunch of technologies and wallets today. I'm sure I've missed a lot. If you have a personal favorite way of storing your cryptocurrency, mention it in the comments below. I'd love to hear about it and check it out myself, and I'm sure a lot of other people would too. There's hundreds of wallets out there, and I'm sure I haven't discovered all of them. So I hope you enjoyed the video and it was kind of helpful in giving you an understanding of how, security and ease of use are kind of a trade-off, and it's about finding that happy medium in the middle where there's a low likelihood of your money getting stolen or hacked, but also you have the ability to freely access it all the time. Because what's the point of a currency if you can't easily access it and use it? So again, if this was helpful, like and subscribe. There'll be more videos in the future, and I'll see you next time.